Substance use disorders are widespread. They affect people from all walks of life. It could be your neighbor, a coworker, or even a family member. The signs of addiction aren't always visible. It often hides in plain sight. These disorders impact people regardless of age, background, or socioeconomic status. Families are affected and careers are disrupted. Tragically, lives are often cut short. It's a public health issue that needs our attention. Misconceptions and stigma surround substance use disorders. People struggling are often unfairly labeled. These stereotypes prevent individuals from seeking help. We need to challenge these misconceptions. Addiction is a complex medical condition. It involves biological, psychological, and social factors. Understanding this fosters empathy and support for recovery. Breaking down stigma paves the way for prevention, treatment, and recovery. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of those affected by this condition. Substance use disorders are rooted in powerful changes in brain chemistry. When someone repeatedly uses drugs or alcohol, it hijacks the brain's reward system. This system, usually associated with pleasure and motivation, becomes flooded with dopamine, creating an intense but fleeting euphoria. Over time, the brain adapts to this chemical onslaught. It requires more and more of the substance to achieve the same effect. This is tolerance, a hallmark of addiction. The brain's reward pathways become so altered that normal, healthy activities no longer elicit the same level of pleasure. Things that used to bring joy, such as spending time with loved ones or engaging in hobbies, lose their appeal. The individual becomes increasingly focused on obtaining and using the substance, often at the expense of their physical health, relationships, and overall well-being. This is the insidious nature of addiction. It rewires the brain's circuitry, making it incredibly difficult to break free from the cycle of cravings and use. Genetics also play a role in substance use disorders. Individuals with a family history of addiction may be more vulnerable to developing these conditions themselves. This doesn't mean addiction is predetermined. However, it underscores the complex interplay between nature and nurture. Environmental factors such as trauma, stress, and early exposure to substances can also significantly influence the development and progression of addiction. Substance use disorders are not simply a matter of willpower or making bad choices. They are complex medical conditions with a strong biological basis. Understanding the science behind addiction is crucial for dispelling myths, reducing stigma, and developing effective prevention and treatment strategies. By recognizing the biological underpinnings, we can approach addiction with greater empathy, compassion, and a commitment to evidence-based care. Recovery from substance use disorder is not only possible, it's a testament to the brain's incredible ability to heal and adapt. Just as the brain's pathways can be hijacked by addiction, they can also be rerouted through therapy, support, and lifestyle changes. Recovery is a journey, not a destination. It's a process of self-discovery, growth, and reclaiming one's life. There are many paths to recovery, each tailored to the individual's unique needs and circumstances. From evidence-based therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing, to peer support groups and holistic approaches, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The key is finding what works best for the individual and providing unwavering support along the way. Recovery is rarely linear. Setbacks and relapses can occur, but they don't signify failure. They are opportunities for learning, growth, and strengthening one's resolve. It's essential to approach relapse with compassion, not judgment. By viewing it as a part of the process, we can help individuals get back on track and continue their journey toward lasting recovery. The journey of recovery may be challenging, but it's filled with hope, resilience, and the possibility of transformation. By fostering understanding, reducing stigma, and expanding access to effective treatment and support, we can empower individuals to break free from the grip of addiction and create a brighter future for themselves and their loved ones. Every step toward recovery is a victory, a testament to the enduring human spirit.
The air in my apartment hung heavy with unspoken words. Years of escalating substance use had taken their toll, leaving a trail of broken promises and strained relationships in its wake.
I had borne witness to his decline, my heart aching with each missed call, each evasive answer, each glimpse of the brother I feared losing. The weight of my worry was a constant companion.
Emma wasn't alone in her concern. A close friend of mine, someone who had shared laughs and good times with me in our younger years, could no longer ignore the stark change in my demeanor.
The vibrant, engaging person we once knew was now a shadow, shrouded in secrecy and consumed by his addiction. The friend grappled with a mix of anger and helplessness, torn between wanting to shake him awake and simply offering a shoulder to lean on.
Their attempts to reach out to me were met with a mixture of denial and deflection. I downplayed the severity of my substance use, making promises I couldn't keep, assuring them I was handling it. But my words rang hollow, failing to mask the truth that was evident in my bloodshot eyes, my trembling hands, and my withdrawn demeanor. The chasm between us widened with each passing day.
Desperate for a solution, the friend and I found ourselves reaching out to a professional, a recovery coach with experience in guiding families through the choppy waters of intervention. Our hope, though fragile, was rekindled by the coach's calm demeanor and words of reassurance. We clung to the possibility, however slim, that this intervention might be the lifeline my brother needed, a chance to break free from the clutches of addiction and reclaim his life.
The day of the intervention arrived, a tapestry woven with equal parts apprehension and determination. The air in Client B's apartment crackled with a tension that was palpable, a silence thick with unspoken emotions.
We all sat in the living room trying to keep our anxiety in check. Each of us had poured our hearts into letters, choosing each word so carefully, each syllable a testament to our love for him.
Client B's arrival shattered the uneasy quiet. He entered his own apartment like a stranger, his eyes darting nervously around the room, registering the presence of his sister, his friend, and an unfamiliar face. He knew somehow that this wasn't a casual visit. The air was different, thick with a gravity he couldn't quite place, but one that sent a jolt of apprehension through him. The weight of their gazes, heavy with a mixture of love and concern, was impossible to ignore.
I was the first to speak, my voice trembling slightly, but my words unwavering. I spoke of my love for him, recounting instances where his addiction had cast a shadow over our lives, moments that had left an indelible mark on my heart.
Her friend followed, echoing her sentiments, sharing anecdotes of a time before addiction had taken hold, memories laced with both laughter and a deep sense of loss.
I gently guided the conversation, ensuring that the focus remained on Client B's well-being, steering clear of blame and judgment. I spoke of the science behind addiction, emphasizing that it was not a moral failing, but a disease that required treatment and support. I painted a picture of recovery, not as a distant possibility, but as a tangible goal within Client B's reach.
The weight of the intervention pressed down on Client B, a suffocating blanket of guilt and shame. His initial instinct was to deflect, to disappear back into the fog of addiction that had become his only solace. But as he looked at the faces of his sister, his friend, the raw emotion etched on their faces, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. A sliver of hope piercing through the darkness.
The recovery coach's words about detox, about a structured environment where I could begin to heal, both terrified and intrigued me. The thought of facing life without the crutch of substances filled me with dread, yet the alternative, continuing down the path of self-destruction, held even less appeal. I sat there caught in the crosshairs of my addiction and the possibility of a life beyond it.
He looked at Emma, her eyes red-rimmed but shining with a love that he realized he couldn't bear to lose. In that moment, something shifted within him. The weight of their love, the depth of their concern, broke through the wall of denial he'd so carefully erected around himself. He saw, perhaps for the first time, the devastation his addiction had wrought, not just in his own life but in the lives of those he loved most.
Okay, I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion.
The word hung in the air, a fragile promise, a beacon of hope in the darkness. It wasn't a surrender, but a step, however shaky, towards a future free from the grip of addiction. In that single word, a glimmer of hope ignited, a spark that had the potential to grow into a flame, illuminating the long and arduous path to recovery that lay ahead. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, Client B dared to believe that it might just be possible. The car ride to the detox facility was a blur to Client B. A jumble of emotions swirled within him, fear of the unknown, a sense of relief at finally taking action, and a deep-seated shame that he'd let things spiral so far out of control. He clutched the small bag containing his belongings, his knuckles white, his heart pounding a relentless rhythm against his ribs. Each mile that passed felt like a step further away from the life he knew, the life that had become both a comfort and a curse.
Upon arriving at the facility, a sense of calm washed over me. The starkness I'd envisioned was replaced by a sense of quiet order. The staff, I observed, were neither judgmental nor patronizing. Their demeanor was one of professional compassion, a quiet understanding that put me somewhat at ease.
The intake process was thorough, yet respectful. A series of questions and forms that acknowledged the complexities of his situation without making him feel defined by it. As Client B settled into his room, a small, Spartan space designed for comfort and safety, the reality of what he'd undertaken began to set in. The absence of his usual escape, the bottle, the powder, left a void that was both terrifying and strangely liberating. His body, accustomed to the constant influx of substances, began to rebel. Tremors ran through his hands, a cold sweat clung to his skin, and his stomach churned with nausea. Withdrawal, he was warned, was setting in.
I had prepared him for this, explaining that detox was the crucial first step, a necessary purging of the toxins that had held him captive for so long. It wouldn't be easy, I cautioned him, but it was a battle worth fighting.
The physical symptoms of withdrawal were relentless. My body, deprived of the substances it had come to depend on, was in full revolt. Waves of nausea rolled over me, making it difficult to keep down even the simplest of foods. The tremors in my hands intensified, making even the simplest tasks, like holding a glass of water, a monumental effort. Sleep, once my only escape from the torment of my addiction, now eluded me. I tossed and turned for hours, my mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts and vivid nightmares that left me drenched in a cold sweat.
Headaches, sharp and unrelenting, pounded behind his eyes, amplified by the sensitivity to light that had become his constant companion. His muscles ached with a deep, bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest could alleviate. He felt as though he were trapped inside his own body, a prisoner of the very cravings he was fighting to overcome. The physical discomfort was a constant reminder of the grip his addiction held on him, a testament to the power of the substances he was determined to break free from. The medical staff at the detox facility monitored his condition closely, providing medication to alleviate the worst of the symptoms and offering words of encouragement and reassurance. They explained that what he was experiencing was a normal part of the detox process, his body's way of purging itself of the toxins that had held him captive for so long. Their calm demeanor and matter-of-fact explanations, devoid of judgment or condemnation, were a source of comfort amidst the storm.
Each wave of nausea, each muscle spasm, each sleepless night was a battle fought and won. I reminded myself that these physical symptoms were temporary, a necessary evil on the road to recovery. While the physical symptoms of withdrawal raged on, a different kind of battle was being waged within my mind. The absence of substances left a void, a hollowness that was as disorienting as it was terrifying. My thoughts, once dulled by drugs and alcohol, now raced through my mind, a chaotic jumble of regrets, anxieties, and cravings that threatened to overwhelm me. The mental and emotional detox, I quickly learned, was just as grueling, if not more so, than the physical one.
The insidious nature of addiction revealed itself in the constant barrage of intrusive thoughts. His mind, accustomed to numbing itself with substances, now replayed past mistakes, magnified his insecurities, and whispered seductive lies about the allure of just one more drink, one more line. The urge to escape, to silence the cacophony in his head, was almost unbearable. He had to constantly remind himself that these thoughts were not facts, but rather the desperate pleas of a brain struggling to regain its equilibrium.
The therapy sessions, both individual and group, provided a lifeline. In the presence of others who understood my struggle, who spoke my language of cravings and triggers, I found a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Sharing my story, baring my soul to strangers who met me with compassion instead of judgment, was both cathartic and empowering. I began to realize that I wasn't alone in my fight, that recovery was not a solitary pursuit, but a journey best undertaken with the support of others who understood the terrain.
The therapists, skilled in the art of untangling the knotted threads of addiction, provided him with tools to combat the negative self-talk and challenge the distorted thinking patterns that had kept him trapped for so long. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helped him identify and reframe the destructive thought patterns that fueled his addiction, while motivational interviewing, MI, empowered him to tap into his own internal motivation for change. The journey was arduous, but with each session, each shared story, each new coping mechanism he acquired, Client B felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that he was slowly but surely reclaiming his mind from the clutches of addiction.
The group therapy room had a sterile feel with its plain walls and fluorescent lighting, yet it held an unexpected warmth. For me, stepping into that room for the first time felt like crossing an invisible threshold, entering a space where vulnerability wasn't weakness but a shared language. I looked around at the faces of the other participants, a diverse group brought together by our shared struggle with addiction. There were moments of shared laughter, knowing glances exchanged, and tears shed without judgment, creating a sense of camaraderie that transcended our differences.
The group sessions, facilitated by a therapist with a calm demeanor and a knack for drawing people out, provided a safe space for Client B to shed the mask he'd worn for so long. He listened intently as others shared their stories, their voices raw with honesty, their experiences echoing his own in ways he hadn't anticipated. He heard tales of relapse and regret, of broken promises and shattered dreams, but also of resilience, of small victories won, and of the enduring power of hope.
It was in these shared stories, these glimpses into the lives of others who had walked a similar path, that I began to truly grasp the magnitude of my own struggle, but also the very real possibility of overcoming it.
The therapist, acting as a guide on their collective journey, introduced the concept of the use cycle, a recurring pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that often preceded and followed substance use. Through group discussions and interactive exercises, Client B began to recognize this cycle in his own life, identifying his personal triggers, the seductive thoughts that led him down a dangerous path, and the all-too-familiar consequences that inevitably followed. This newfound awareness, though initially unsettling, was a crucial step towards breaking free from the grip of addiction. It was like shining a light on a hidden mechanism, exposing its inner workings so he could begin to dismantle it, piece by piece.
As the sessions progressed, I found myself opening up more, sharing my own experiences with a vulnerability that surprised even me. I spoke of the shame I'd carried for so long, the fear that had kept me tethered to my addiction, and the guilt that gnawed at my conscience. Each time I spoke, each time I allowed myself to be seen in my raw and unfiltered truth, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The group, in turn, met me with empathy and support, their responses a chorus of understanding, their shared experiences a testament to the power of human connection in the face of adversity.
The process of mapping his triggers was like excavating layers of sediment, each layer revealing a piece of the puzzle, a clue to the origins of his addiction.
In the safe space of individual therapy sessions, with the therapist's gentle guidance, I began to delve into the labyrinth of my past, unearthing memories I'd long buried, confronting emotions I'd numbed with substances.
He came to realize that his addiction wasn't simply a matter of willpower, but a complex tapestry woven from threads of genetics, childhood experiences, and the maladaptive coping mechanisms he'd developed to navigate a world that often felt overwhelming.
I spoke of a childhood marked by a distant father and an overbearing mother, of the pressure to succeed that had suffocated my spirit, and of the loneliness that had become my constant companion.
He recalled his first experiences with alcohol and drugs, the fleeting sense of relief they provided, a temporary reprieve from the emotional turmoil that raged within him.
With the therapist's help, I began to connect the dots, recognizing how these early experiences had shaped my relationship with substances, how they had become my go-to solution for numbing pain, silencing self-doubt, and escaping the harsh realities of life.
The therapist, trained in trauma-informed care, helped him to see that his addiction wasn't a sign of weakness or a moral failing, but rather a testament to his resilience, his desperate attempt to survive in a world that had often felt unsafe and unwelcoming.
This shift in perspective from self-condemnation to self-compassion was a turning point in my journey. It allowed me to approach my past with a newfound sense of understanding, to view my addiction not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a symptom of deeper wounds that needed tending.
As he gained a deeper understanding of the roots of his addiction, Client B began to challenge the negative core beliefs that had taken root in his psyche. Beliefs that he was unworthy of love, incapable of change, and destined to repeat the mistakes of his past.
With the therapist's guidance, I explored these beliefs with curiosity rather than judgment, dissecting them, questioning their validity, and gradually replacing them with more empowering truths.
He began to see that he was not defined by his addiction, that he was capable of making different choices, and that he deserved a life free from the shackles of substance abuse. The realization that recovery was an ongoing process, a daily commitment to choosing a different path, was both daunting and empowering for Client B.
I knew that cravings would inevitably arise, that triggers would test my resolve, but I no longer felt powerless against them.
Through therapy and group sessions, he had begun to assemble a toolkit of strategies, a collection of mental and behavioral techniques that would equip him to navigate the challenges ahead with greater resilience and self-awareness.
One of the most valuable tools I acquired was the ability to identify and manage my cravings. I learned to recognize the early warning signs, the subtle shifts in mood, the intrusive thoughts, the physical sensations that often preceded a full-blown urge to use.
He practiced mindfulness techniques, learning to observe his cravings without judgment, acknowledging their presence without giving in to their demands.
I discovered that the intensity of a craving often diminished when I simply allowed myself to feel it, to ride the wave of discomfort without letting it dictate my actions.
He also developed a repertoire of coping skills to deploy when cravings threatened to overwhelm him.
I found solace in journaling, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto paper, externalizing the internal turmoil that often fueled my desire to use.
He reconnected with his love of music, discovering that the act of creating, of losing himself in the rhythm and flow, could quiet the noise in his mind and soothe his restless spirit.
I committed to regular exercise, embracing the endorphin rush that came with pushing my physical limits, a healthy addiction that replaced the destructive one I was fighting to overcome.
Perhaps most importantly, Client B cultivated a network of support, a lifeline to reach for when the waters got rough.
I stayed connected with my group therapy peers, finding strength in our shared journey, our willingness to be vulnerable with each other, and our unwavering belief in my ability to recover.
He leaned on his sister and the friend who had been with him from the start, their unconditional love and support a constant reminder that he was not alone in this fight.
I knew that I didn't have to navigate the choppy waters of recovery alone, that there were people who cared about me, who believed in me, and who would be there to offer a helping hand whenever I needed it.
The therapist's office was a stark contrast to the sterile environment of the detox facility.
Soft lighting, muted colors, and carefully chosen artwork created an atmosphere of calm and safety, a sanctuary where I could shed the weight of my struggles and embark on the daunting task of self-discovery.
The therapist, a woman with a warm smile and eyes that held a depth of understanding, had a way of listening that made him feel seen and heard, not judged or analyzed.
In the confines of this room, with its promise of confidentiality and non-judgment, I began to unravel the layers of my addiction, peeling back the years of denial and self-deception to reveal the raw, vulnerable core beneath.
He spoke of his childhood, his voice often catching as he recounted moments of emotional neglect, of the pressure to succeed that had suffocated his spirit, and the loneliness that had become his constant companion.
With each session, each shared memory, I felt a weight lifting, a sense of liberation that came with finally giving voice to the pain I'd carried for so long.
The therapist listened with an empathy that was both disarming and empowering.
She didn't interrupt with interpretations or advice, but rather reflected my words back to me, offering gentle insights and observations that helped me connect the dots to see the patterns in my life that had led me to this point.
Her approach wasn't about providing answers, but rather about empowering him to find his own, to become an active participant in his own healing.
As the sessions progressed, a sense of trust blossomed between us, a shared understanding that this was a journey we were undertaking together, a collaborative effort to unearth the root causes of my addiction and to equip me with the tools I needed to build a life free from its grip.
The therapist's office became a haven, a place where he could be completely honest, where he could shed the mask he'd worn for so long and embrace the messy, complicated truth of who he was.
Through a combination of talk therapy, journaling exercises, and guided meditations, I began to delve beneath the surface of my addiction, uncovering the core beliefs that had shaped my perception of myself and the world around me. These beliefs, often formed in childhood as coping mechanisms to navigate difficult emotions, had become deeply ingrained, shaping my choices and perpetuating the cycle of addiction. I discovered a deep-seated belief that I was fundamentally flawed, unworthy of love, and incapable of achieving lasting happiness. This belief, rooted in early experiences of rejection and emotional neglect, had become a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading me to seek validation and solace in the fleeting embrace of substances. I'd come to believe that I didn't deserve genuine connection, that I was destined to disappoint those who dared to care about me. Another core belief that surfaced was the idea that I lacked the inner strength and resilience to cope with life's challenges without resorting to substances. This belief, reinforced by years of numbing my emotions and avoiding discomfort, had eroded my self-efficacy, leaving me feeling powerless and defeated. I'd come to see myself as a victim of circumstance, incapable of creating lasting change in my life.
I helped him to recognize that these core beliefs, while deeply ingrained, were not immutable truths, but rather learned responses to past experiences. I encouraged him to view these beliefs with curiosity rather than judgment, to explore their origins, and to challenge their validity. Through this process of self-examination and compassionate inquiry, he began to chip away at the foundation of his addiction, creating space for new, more empowering beliefs to take root.
One of the most profound realizations for me was the understanding that change is rarely linear, that progress is often accompanied by setbacks, and that embracing ambivalence is an integral part of the recovery journey. I learned that it's okay to feel two ways about getting better, to simultaneously crave the comfort of my addiction while yearning for a life free from its grip.
I introduced him to the principles of motivational interviewing, MI, a therapeutic approach that emphasizes collaboration, empathy, and the importance of tapping into the client's own internal motivation for change. I taught him that ambivalence isn't a sign of weakness or resistance, but rather a natural part of the human experience, especially when it comes to making significant life changes.
I discovered that instead of trying to force myself to change, I could gently explore my ambivalence, acknowledging both the costs and benefits of continuing my current behavior patterns. I began to identify my values, the qualities and principles that were most important to me, and to explore how my addiction was preventing me from living in alignment with those values. This process of self-reflection and values clarification helped me to connect with my own internal motivation for change, to tap into the part of me that yearned for something more than the fleeting relief of substances. I began to see that recovery wasn't just about stopping a behavior, but about reclaiming my life, about becoming the best version of myself. I embraced the dance of change, acknowledging that there would be missteps along the way, but trusting that each step, however small, was moving me closer to the life I envisioned for myself. The relapse. The initial weeks following discharge from the facility were a blur of adjustments for me. The structure and support of inpatient treatment were gone, replaced by the daunting reality of navigating life on life's terms. I felt like a tightrope walker, meticulously placing one foot in front of the other, acutely aware of the precariousness of my balance. The cravings, though less intense, still lurked in the shadows of my mind, waiting for an opportunity to pounce. The outside world, once a distant hum, now pressed in on me with a cacophony of triggers. The familiar sights and smells of my old neighborhood, the casual invitations to meet up for drinks after work, the seemingly harmless banter about weekend plans that revolved around alcohol, all of it chipped away at my resolve, testing the fragile foundation of my recovery. I felt like I was constantly on guard, bracing myself against an invisible enemy that threatened to derail my hard-won progress.
One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, the walls seemed to close in on him. He'd received a text from his ex, a curt message that reopened old wounds of rejection and abandonment. The familiar urge to numb the pain, to silence the negative self-talk that spiraled in his mind, overwhelmed him. He told himself it would just be one drink, a temporary escape from the overwhelming pressure he felt. He didn't even realize he'd made it to the liquor store until he was standing at the counter, his hand trembling slightly as he paid for the bottle. The familiar burn of alcohol as it slid down his throat provided a momentary reprieve, a brief respite from the emotional storm raging within him. But the relief was fleeting, quickly replaced by a wave of shame and self-recrimination as the realization of what he'd done crashed over him.
The relapse, a painful reminder of the insidious nature of addiction, sent shockwaves through my carefully constructed world. It shattered the illusion of control I'd clung to, leaving me feeling lost and defeated. I'd let myself down, and worse, I disappointed those who had believed in me, who had poured their love and support into my recovery. In that moment of raw vulnerability, I questioned everything, my resolve crumbling under the weight of my perceived failure. The journey back from relapse was paved with a mix of shame, self-recrimination, and a glimmer of hope that flickered amidst the darkness. My initial instinct was to isolate and retreat into the familiar comfort of denial, but I surprised myself by reaching out to my therapist.
The voice on the other end of the line was a lifeline, a beacon of understanding and compassion that cut through the fog of self-loathing that threatened to engulf him.
In the safety of the therapist's office, I began the difficult task of unraveling the relapse chain, carefully retracing my steps to identify the sequence of events, thoughts, and emotions that had led me back to that familiar, destructive place.
With gentle guidance, we explored the triggers that had set him off, the negative self-talk that had amplified his distress, and the flawed coping mechanisms he'd relied on in a moment of weakness. Instead of judgment or condemnation, I met him with empathy and understanding. Relapse is not a failure, but rather a common part of the recovery journey, an opportunity for learning and growth. Your relapse, while painful and disheartening, doesn't erase the progress you've made, nor does it diminish your inherent worthiness of recovery.
Through this process of compassionate inquiry, I began to cultivate a sense of self-compassion, a radical act of kindness towards myself that had been missing for far too long. I learned to differentiate between my behavior and my identity, recognizing that my relapse didn't define me as a person. I began to challenge the all-or-nothing thinking that whispered I'd ruined everything, replacing it with a more balanced perspective that acknowledged both my missteps and my commitment to getting back on track. The journey back from relapse was arduous, a steep climb back up the mountain I'd stumbled down. But with each honest conversation, each act of self-forgiveness, each renewed commitment to my recovery plan, I felt a glimmer of hope returning, a sense of resilience that had been tested but not broken. I was learning through the messy, imperfect process of recovery to embrace my humanity, flaws and all, and to approach my journey with a newfound sense of compassion and determination. The relapse, though a painful setback, served as a catalyst for me to reevaluate and strengthen my recovery plan. I recognized the need for a more robust set of coping mechanisms, a sturdier safety net to catch me when life threw its inevitable curveballs. I worked closely with my therapist and my support group to identify the cracks in my foundation and to develop strategies to fortify those vulnerable areas. One of the key areas of focus was strengthening my support network. I committed to attending more support group meetings, finding solace and strength in the shared experiences of others who understood my struggles. I reached out to my sister and my close friend, rebuilding the bridges that had been strained by my relapse and allowing myself to lean on their love and encouragement. I made a conscious effort to surround myself with people who supported my recovery, creating a circle of trust and accountability that extended beyond the therapist's office. I also explored new coping mechanisms to add to my toolkit. I discovered the calming power of mindfulness meditation, learning to quiet my mind and observe my thoughts and feelings without judgment. I reconnected with my love of music, finding solace in the creative process and using it as a healthy outlet for my emotions. I committed to a regular exercise routine, embracing the endorphin rush and the sense of accomplishment that came with pushing my physical limits. Recognizing the importance of early intervention, I worked with my therapist to develop a relapse prevention plan, a detailed roadmap outlining the warning signs of relapse, personalized coping strategies, and emergency contact information. I identified my personal triggers, the situations and emotions that made me more vulnerable to relapse, and developed specific action plans to navigate those challenges. I committed to being honest with myself and with my support network, reaching out for help at the first sign of trouble rather than trying to white-knuckle it on my own. The relapse, though a painful detour on my recovery journey, ultimately served as a catalyst for growth and transformation. It forced me to confront my vulnerabilities, to strengthen my resolve, and to build a more resilient foundation for lasting recovery. I emerged from this experience with a deeper understanding of myself, a renewed appreciation for the power of connection, and an unwavering belief in my ability to create a brighter future for myself, one day at a time.